Now, into our second part of today's poetry event. I'm delighted to introduce you to Katrina Clutterbuck, Grace Halton, Grace Willens, Tom Haid, and then maybe I'll introduce a few poets after that. Katrina Clutterbuck, Katrina, are you here? Yeah, she's here. Katrina is a lecturer at the School of English Drama and Film here in UCD. She completed her doctorate at the University of Oxford on the poetry of Maeve McGuckian and Elaine Feeney. You'll be delighted. She also wrote on Ivan Boland. We'll talk about that later. Katrina featured in the UCD Festival last year as well. And we're delighted to have her here today. She'll be followed by Grace Halton, and thanks for coming along, Grace. Grace is the senior winner of the 2016 Poetry Aloud competition. After sitting her Leaving Cert examinations this June in St. Louis High School, Rathmines, she hopes to follow her passion and pursue a career in the world of theatre. Grace Willens, is currently an MFA candidate in poetry at UCD here. Her poems have appeared, she's had an amazing year. Her poems have appeared in Poetry Ireland Review, Cyphers, and the new Irish writing series, The Hennessy's, in the Irish Times. Grace will then be followed by Tom Haid. Tom, are you here? Yeah, hi Tom. Tom is an English and film student and still relatively new to the Dublin poetry scene. His work is generally topical, representing whatever is currently most relevant in his own life. So please welcome our next four poets. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks. I'll read four poems. They arise from, they come from a collection that I've been working on over the last 4 years, which I wrote after my daughter Emily passed away. Emily was nearly 11 and she died of sudden cardiac death. So I'll read two fish poems, which were written about 6 months after Emily died, and then two bird poems, one written inside the first few months and the other 3 years later. And as I was putting them together this morning, I began to wonder whether each pair of poems maybe speaks to the two poles of energy that happen in the process of grief, one being blankness and the other something else. So, Seashell. The life we have lost has left a shape that is curving us round the bend. We are hollowed out to ourselves by your passing, though the sea still knows us on the shore. Fiona Fish. A whoop of memory. Emily, as a small child, wanting me to tell her again and again the story of a salmon we named Fiona Fish. Not because she was already long too old for such stories, but because she will never now be here to remember them with. I ask, can a memory exist outside of its sharing? I have only this answer. Every night, Fiona Fish came home against all odds to breed in the upper magical reaches of the stream where she was born and where no human ever came. A story still unfolding in the hours it holds of myself, that child's mother, holding her and spelling her to sleep under its frame. Bird again. Crossing and cutting the glass pane of this grief, folding in on itself. The moments cut by birdsong or flight, every day since you were waked, and for the first time, the sharp, clear chirp of some small bird came calling, clear and sharp. Finally, the barn owl. Today, I sat by your grave and prayed for help. No matter how this desert has bloomed since you died, nor how worthy even the cause of your memory, your absence remains unforgivable. Then tonight, your father asked me out to see the low, full moon emerge from between its swags of cloud, and our friends out late checking sheep, hearing us, called us up the field to shine a bright torch high into the ash tree on our boundary ditch, and showed us a barn owl and 2 chicks nesting, accounting at last for the strange calls we've heard each dusk up the hill for weeks. My sweet daughter, you have answered me in every way you could. Tomorrow, we will rediscover your first-class school workbook, where, to the set question, "What is your favourite animal?" you wrote, "A barn owl," though I've never seen one. Thank you.
I'm very grateful to escape my Leaving Cert study for a few hours to read 2 poems to you, the second of which is Easter 1916 by Butler Yates. But first, The Listeners by Walter Delamere. "Is there anybody there?" said the traveller, knocking on the moonlit door. And his horse in the silence champed the grasses of the forest's ferny floor. And a bird flew up out of the turret, above the traveller's head. And he smote upon the door again, a second time. "Is there anybody there?" he said. But no one descended to the traveller. No head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes, where he stood, perplexed and still. But only a host of phantom listeners that dwelt in the lone house then stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight to that voice from the world of men. Stood thronging the faint moonbeams on the dark stair that goes down to the empty hall, hearkening in an air stirred and shaken by the lonely traveller's call. And he felt in his heart their strangeness, their stillness answering his cry, while his horse moved, cropping the dark turf 'neath the starred and leafy sky. For he suddenly smote on the door, even louder, and lifted his head. "Tell them I came, and no one answered, that I kept my word," he said. Never the least stir made the listeners, though every word he spake fell echoing through the shadowiness of the still house, from the one man left awake. Aye, they heard his foot upon the stirrup, the sound of iron on stone, and how the silence surged softly backwards when the plunging hoofs were gone. Easter 1916 by Butler Yates. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head, or polite, meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite, meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lived where motley is worn. All changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. That woman spent her days in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers when, young and beautiful, she rode to harriers? This man had kept a school, and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I dreamed a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart, yet I number him in this song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone through summer and winter seem enchanted to the stone, to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, and a horse plashes within it. The long-legged moor hens dive, and hens to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they live. The stone's in the midst of it all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice? That is heaven's part. Our part to murmur name upon name, as a mother names her child when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? No, not night, but death. And was it needless death after all? For England may keep sake for all that is done and said. We know their dream enough to know they dreamed and are dead. And was it excess of love that bewildered them till they died? I write it out in a verse. MacDonough and MacBride, and Connolly and Pearce, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born.
So thank you all so much for being here today, and many thanks to Paul and to the archive for arranging this event. It's a pleasure to read alongside all of you. My name is Grace Willens, and I'll just be reading two poems. The first is quite old, it's about 11 years old, but I've never read it publicly before. This first poem is called Cancer Diary 2. When you pay attention to what you're doing, it can become interesting. Are you looking? Manage lymph damage. Stimulate drainage from affected arm to unaffected. Press behind clavicles, along sternum, shoulder, arm. The interrelation of the system is its self-destructive capability, inbuilt. No way to make cells aware they are abnormal. A gene is wired to maybe grind a cell into soup. DNA directs RNA. Reception and then reaction. The cell is not a body or a breast. Lots of handouts, support groups, Smith Farm, Virginia, green tea, clover, soy. Things that annoy you, nakedness, the vein in your left arm tapped out. And the second and last poem I'll read was written after a childhood trip that I took to Florida. My family didn't go on holidays much, so this was about the most exotic place I'd ever been. And it's set at a tourist site that was built by a man who excavated all this coral out of the sea to make this sort of outdoor sculpture garden. And the idea was that it would win over the girl he was in love with, and of course it was bizarre and didn't work. But this site takes its name, the poem takes its name from the name of the site, which is called the Coral Castle. So this is Coral Castle. In Homestead, Florida, a tourist trap off the South Dixie Highway draws sandaled visitors as if by invisible magnet, turning each car from its course. This array of coral slabs arranged into henges and dolmens is carved to a cold home that is also a tribute and a gutted abbey, open to the air under a ceiling of sky. At the entrance, you receive the little photocopied map with a bird's eye view of the Coral Castle. The 9-ton gate balanced perfectly on the axle of a 1918 Ford truck leads you into the grotto of the Three Bears and a set of chairs for reasoning. The Florida table is an homage to the state's weird geography. Then there is the sun couch, the well, and the feast of love table carved in the shape of a heart. The repentance corner adjoins the barbecue. But the throne room, majestic, is where his love could climb up, take her pick of elevated seats topped by carvings of the moon and Saturn. Demented Ed built it. Still no one knows how. The neighbors mostly ignored him, his wizened little silhouette working against the Florida sun. One local looking back recalls the small box Ed set up on a tripod, the pinhole he cut in it, and the cloth he draped to cover himself. The recollection is that he worked secretly, always at night, never showing his methods, alone, removing and moving lumps of honeycomb coral from the sea, heavier in weight than the blocks composing the pyramids, his technology unknowable as the word's unit of mystery, to go down with him when he died, loveless. The Coral Castle didn't win her as he thought it would. Realizing this, how different it would have looked as he walked it empty and alone, trailing his hands against the rough braille of its walls, asking himself, what was all this for if it couldn't win me love? What lightness is possible when a pockmarked slab of coral that once gave some shelter in a changing ocean hefts its own ton weight, scrapes itself loose, floats effortless as the Ouija's planchette, as it hovers impossibly up from beneath the waves and begins its crossing to stand upon the shore. Thank you so much.
Hi. This poem, like most of my poems, concerns my mental health and my experiences with trauma. So this poem deals with sexual assault, abuse, and fractured self-image. And also I'm quite known to yell when I do poems, so I'll try and avoid doing that into the microphone for all your sakes. My first boyfriend never kissed me. Oh, he was no monk. His thin white hand found itself under my loose hoodies often enough, but he never kissed me. I couldn't understand that. I'd seen every film. I was Sandra Bullock and he was my leading man. Every time we held hands, I felt fireworks. I laughed at all his jokes. I put up with his too tight grip and his too loud friends, but he never kissed me. Later, of course, I learned that no amount of coy smiles and one-sided conversations about those fucking Halo games could fix my face.
good enough for a quick grope, nothing more. It's funny how a legacy of emotional trauma fuels itself on others' attention, because I've never dated since. I've had flings, been caught in that loop of will they, won't they, but you won't. I won't. I know better than to ask to be kissed. My love is a game to you. The first time I was ever fucked, I moaned for him. I was too drunk to see, and his hands hurt my waist, but I stayed put for him. I'd seen all the videos, practiced in the mirror. It didn't matter if I liked it as long as he was happy, right? If I made the right faces and keened at the right pitch, maybe he'd stay with me. Maybe he'd seek out a person behind the meat and he'd hold me, but he didn't. Didn't even finish. Certainly didn't call me good enough for a drunken fuck, nothing more. It's funny how you see the same looks in the eyes of different people, how everyone who's ever been with me has chased my lips with a shot of vodka. You take my no as a yes, and then you disinfect yourself before the morning. You tell me how wasted you were with that smile that says, let's not talk about it, hon, my love is a joke to you. The first man who ever called me beautiful asked to see my sweet little boy pussy, faceless and voiceless behind a text box. His anonymity made him powerful and made me small. He was just words when I was an exposed body, his for the taking, if not for the touching. He spun abuse into silk for me to spread myself on. You get so hungry for attention, you'll take a stranger's instructions. If I just made him happy, he'd tell me I was good. He'd make me whole again. Wouldn't he? Good enough to spit on, nothing more. It's funny how you learn to see your body as an object, broken, dirty, expendable. I prime and polish it, turn the camera to just the right angle, but all the filters in the world won't hide the scars. You'll bend me over in a dirty nightclub bathroom, but you won't ask me my name. You won't look past the bruised skin. My love is a fetish to you. I love you, and I hate it. Thank you so much.
Great audience, thanks. I'd also like to thank Dr. Lucy Collins and especially Ursula Byrne, who've helped put together this afternoon's reading. So thank you both very much. Our next three poets before we break for music again are Julie Morrissey, Biddy Jenkinson and Sarah Clancy. Julie Morrissey is a graduate of UCD in law and a graduate of our MA in creative writing. Her pamphlet, I Am Where, is published by Eyewear Press, and her debut collection, Where the Mile End, is forthcoming from Canadian press Book Thug. Biddy Jenkinson is an award-winning Irish poet, dramatist, short story writer and children's author who has written extensively in the Irish language. She is an adjunct professor in the UCD School of Irish, Celtic Studies and Folklore. And finally, ending part two of our poetry marathon is Sarah Clancy. Delighted to have Sarah here. She's a page and performance poet from Galway. She's published the collection Stacey and the Mechanical Bull, Thanks for Nothing, Hippies, and The Truth and Other Stories. So please welcome Julie, Biddy, and then Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I just want to let everyone know there's an abundance of water up here for all the thirsty people over there. I wrote this when I spent some time out in Carraroe in the west of Ireland, and when we were walking the beaches there, and you're standing on the rocks, you're literally standing at the edge of Ireland. This is called 2014. It had been washed up onto the shore against the broken rock face, beyond the seaweed slime and bits of bucket, rope and dirt. the skin on its bottom half peeled back, pecked off, maybe, showcasing the dull pink pallor of this sea beast. Half undressed or half dressed, depending how it argued its case. The tiny furs that remained covered its wide back, pointy ears, a couple of teeth showing, right eye missing. Unclear if it had fallen out before or after death, or had been eaten, or if that was just something that happened when a seal dies. The wind carried the odor that swirled around its plump corpse, ready to burst out of what was left of its skin. Curdled blood and bloated organs lay threatening underneath, boiling in the midday sun, layers of blubber holding it all inside. But when we stood, and from 4 feet away, threw a stone onto its belly, the thud was heard from the seashore into the depths of Scrib and beyond. The holy well rippled, sea salt reverberated, the Virgin Mary's hand twitched, a natural urge after the 3-decade-long pins and needles. The sound flew up the knitted hills we had skipped over, into the cracks under our feet, through the keyholes in granite, those tiny spaces still large enough for it to slink through. The stone, medium-sized, light grey, speckled, unremarkable really, remained flat on the middle of the washed-up body. 2 pieces of evidence, victim and interference and victim, half covered, a real mess. In a few days, the stench will pierce the wet air, unbearable. The locals will cover their mouths and noses. Tourists will turn back to rental cars. Until the nearest flat cap pushes the offending body back. No small effort, mind. He gathers the other men. They stand to contemplate the best course of action, staring at this rotting full corpse, this gentle hazard, at the edge of the roll of the tide, nodding their wrinkled chins in agreement, heads slightly scratched, eyebrows almost furrowed. Big, big men. Thank you.
Growing older is a wonderful liberation. My mother at 90 decided that she no longer spoke English. She only spoke in Irish meters and did so well that had she lived in a better time, she would have gone down in history as a Coinseach, a female satirist. And I too have found the liberation in the advancing years. One of the liberations is that I can now admire male beauty in general or in particular without being suspected of having ulterior motives. And Irish males need to be admired, especially those in the Irish language literary tradition, because most of the songs praise female beauty. There's the P. Maranala and Aidan Marshnachta, Kam Shank Shingalaling. But the men take halfpenny place, and this is an attempt to rectify that. I might add that I have never, to my knowledge, written a serious poem yet, which accounts for the fact that I'm not considered to be a serious poet. Doesn't follow. Píb Maranella. Tom Trom Maran ta Haranu is John Slán noch é scríomh. De scéve chur mé as rocht. Shola Maran de vashe a bhuíomh. Tom tauntathe ceall raibh homplí, caig nach míoch fur fáil in súl. Nu vedish multa ag maná. Is tú grían fear éireann go sanniu. Is mé paintáil. Liam le ganna de héal crua de crua nach mín. Lacham de fiola, sneam de smig curm íchalar de gairí. Ach Thames an aber nach dawn, on fuckle crin, ní hees crí. Moir go bles gan chan vas, ach tan croissant rief platín. Níl fear gan médul beg no mór, nedatha faoi bhuns go héin. Dóna go bheith gur mé an bhean a dhéananig bolog im scríomh. I'm invoking the Muse's assistance to be the first female poet in Ireland to adore a beer belly. Cracking the crochter in a heol, a crown, a sfarig mastra town, ken chi mech sé, mean little rose, a quiscarown. Kirsch, whom a vrid, a vey, sauli did and scave arrowel. Togamorum, Morana skrif dirach mar a hogreen to. Jordam nahan of them na, cutie kindje, a dichtias murra. Dulhig Sean imchan, Shoal Seamus, a gumpel mangui. The other one I'll read is Gardener's poem. I'm a gardener above all else. And Eva in a gardening loun in your. We're familiar with the verse Genesis 3:17 from the Bible. I'm not sure what the English is. Gurav malacht an talav de hiwn, for yulis a heroi to the chudda, gachlad the hail. Cursed be the ground, cursed be the earth. In labor, in sorrow you shall bring forth. What is it? It's not bring forth bread. Anyway, that's the verse I mean. And I reject that as a curse, because one of the greatest pleasures is to make the ground fertile. The baby is worth the pang of giving birth. The life is worth paying death for it. So the curse is in actual fact a blessing. Ca morana ma machlúne fragart na talún, curim shield the grey, supreme ruthy crown a murin in May, canam an shanos, e go fort le shonig vanina, assel, bacca, kerka, gasur, baiva, ba. Thigam, snaim, peiste, quick around, hugus kurchu aean. Fui machurum, fassen ule, gallan kirke a grave, Tean kerke gar, ba falleim, gra e brave. Níl in alles ma valley ac úsk evenish. Is few on lanav, the shelter. Is few on vaha, a fiaca. Crossum malacht day. Cleum a yehel. Curimshe blah eg fas lac na bianta. Gurv mahagav. Stand up.
Hello everyone. This is a poetry endurance test. I was just thinking when I was driving up this morning, this was like gave Elaine Feeney a lift up and Mulhall. So I was thinking it was a bit like Culchie shopping day before Christmas, you know. So I was thinking it must be Rednecks Day in UCD. So I thought I'd read you a poem to start off with some pastoral images in it. It's the first poem I ever had published, and I thought, like Seamus Heaney, you had to have a bit of dirt under your fingernails in them. So this is called Hippie Get a Job. It's also my CV if anyone's hiring. You might not realise your predictability, but when you caught my eye on Chop Street at the demo, I could see the thoughtless words forming in your brain. So before you shout them at me, past remarkably, let me just stop you there this once. And before those words make it from the gap in your mouth into the air between us, let me tell you something. Because I've wrestled with a pitchfork the same size I was and shoveled unknown tons of horse manure from sheds before your mother brought you breakfast, toast and tea on school mornings before your leaving cert. And when you daydreamed out the window of maths class from an overheated room into the driving rain, I was lifting bales of sodden hay through the mud and bitter wind to the bottom field where the old cow died in spring. And because I had small hands, I woke 100 early mornings to turn unborn lambs around inside their mothers, while you were filling CAO forms, and when you were accepted, bringing weekend washing home on student discount buses, I was pitting my 8 stone, it was a very long time ago, against half a ton of pulling racehorse, and couldn't feel my fingers or open my eyes with the rushing wind. And you then qualified in interviewing in your shirt and tie and nerves while I was taking sweating tourists on foot through humid rainforests, carrying Longhouse chiefs heavy gifts of pineapples the 9 hours back to base in a country you don't have the breadth of mind to even imagine. And then nearer home, when you guffawed into your pint glass and refused to leave Taylor's bar on Sunday early closings, I washed your glass and swept the floor, then woke before the county to spend frozen hours putting rubber bands on live lobsters' claws in a concrete tanks in Barna. And then I bet you were promoted for those clever corporate antics while I did 3 years mortgage paying on the night shift with bleary daytime TV addicts and stoners, manufacturing things you might one day have inserted after one too many business lunches. And later on, when I decided I needed education and you sat with popcorn consuming the latest Hollywood blockbuster, you couldn't see me upstairs in the cinema, part-time working, splicing your next bit of entertainment, and you've no idea how long a day is invigilating young accountants in tedium, in silence, in dusty exam halls with the smell of fast food fat still clinging to your clothes from your nighttime cash in hand gig. You won't realise that I've the streets of Galway imprinted on my brain from delivering goat's cheese and pesto pizza to your Knocknacara sofa, or that I'm an expert on late-night radio and all-night petrol stations, the secondary benefits of my unfree education. And now and here, when I finally got myself some work I think has merit, and I choose to use my day off working to defend the rights of others, don't be surprised at all how quickly I abandon my principles of non-violence and use this placard on you as a weapon if you say what you're thinking. I heard a politician on the radio one morning. I think it's our future Taoiseach by the looks of things, and he was saying that we needed to be entrepreneurial about homelessness, and I thought I'd never heard anything so ridiculous in my entire life. So this is a poem about that, and it's called Solutions to Homelessness. It's got a whole load of Galway place names in it, so if you're wondering what I'm on about, that's what it's about. Solutions to Homelessness for Rita Ann Higgins. Sure, can't you live in the drain pipes or on one of those windowsills with the thin metal spikes on them? If the pigeons can manage it, I don't see your problem. Are you a bird or a man? Can't you fold yourself into the ashtray of an old Nissan Micra? These days, no one is smoking, so I'd say they're all vacant. Can't you sleep in a chip punnet, or better still, a snack box with a lid? Sleep in Air Square, sure, where Pádraig O'Connor used to be, or if you stood in Brown's doorway, that might keep the rain off you. Think outside of the box for once, can't you? You could sleep in a lobster pot, or on the back of a swan down in Claddagh. You could line up a few ducks and lie down on them. Maybe you could sleep on the carrier of one of those crooked-wheeled bicycles the two Belgians left to be vandalised. Or I know, you could tell the guards in at Mill Street that you're there to report a white-collar criminal. It'd be decades before someone could see you, and at least you'd have a roof over your head while you waited. Maybe you could study something in the Open University while you're there in the waiting room and better yourself. You could build yourself into one of Machnas's puppets. You'd surely get at least the summer from it. And if you're not fond of the arts, can't you sleep in the fountain? You'd be showered and all then. You could furl yourself in the sail of a yacht down at the docks, or if you got a small trolley with wheels and you lay on it, you could sleep in one of the segments of the revolving doors in at the Great Southern Hotel without blocking anyone. Will you go away and don't bother me? There's no housing crisis in Galway for anyone with a shred of imagination. Will you show some initiative? Even snails can find homes for themselves. I'll read that for Leo Vadkar. Now, before I came up here, I did a set list, and it always leaves me a bit confused, because I end up with things that says get milk, get bread, and I'm going, oh yes, that's not what I brought here. I'm going to read a couple of poems that are not from either of my collections, and they're a bit quieter, just to basically demonstrate that I'm not a raving psychopath. This is a poem called Hotel Room, and I absolutely love hotel rooms. I worked for a tour guiding company for 4 years because I loved hotel rooms, all the little packets of everything. And so this is a poem pretty much about that, or about how it's, I suppose it's nice to be separate from the world somehow. Hotel Room. The 4 tiny milk cartons on the tea tray in my latest hotel room fill me with my favourite type of loneliness. My out-of-date battery plays James Taylor, and I can't see the sunset from my window, but I know from the warm glow on the mountains that it's brilliant, and I'm missing it, and that stills my mind so I can lie face up and clean sheets without waiting for anything. If a bird flew at my window, and stunned itself, I would rescue it so gently. I'd cup my hands around it so it was safe, and hold it till its frenzied heart slowed. When I felt it soften and give way to calmness, I would release it. I'd only then free it, because nothing can fly if it doesn't itself believe in it. And as the small bird flew off and vanished in the tree line, I'd fill up with the lighter breath of someone who just that moment freed something. My counsellor wants me to explain why I like hotel rooms. She reminds me of some newsreader who doesn't seem to know that if she didn't show up for work one evening, things would keep on happening. That everything doesn't always need to be remarked on. She says, tell me how it feels there. And I laugh, forgetting that with her, that is the route to more and more questions. Why, she says, why are you laughing? And I say, for me, it's self-evident. And she says, I don't know what you mean there. And have you noticed, you've got your arms crossed. Do you feel defensive? And I say, I like hotel rooms and driving long distances. For me, the reasons are self-evident. And she raises one brow at me in a move that looks practiced and says, what are you scared of? And I think, nothing. But I wish someone would cup me in my hands until my heart calmed, until I believed I could do it, and only then release me. Are we for time? I'm just checking how are we for time. It's a very fine line when you're a poet between earning what you're being paid and also not taking everyone else's time, so you have to watch it. So this is a poem I'll read. It's a poem. I spent all of my poetry career so far writing poems about disastrous relationships, and unfortunately I can't write them anymore because I met a very nice person, so this is for her. It's for Anne Mulhall, and it's a kind of a poem about looking back wistfully at making a mess of things. It's called In the Distance. From the chin on hair mornings we're diluted across each blue day, with our useless histories as faint-hearted and wispy as an afternoon moon. Across the bay then, in the evening glow light, childhood's wane, and on just this type of seep-light summer night, pale adolescence tangles in our breath, and we are neither here nor there. But later in the wonder dark and the red fade of our warm bed, with its leg on hip, we let no other versions in. We sleep, oblivious to the heron on the shoreline, to the one illuminated car passing, in ignorance of the fat moth tricked by lamplight and dying in the kitchen. We persist. On nights like this, we stretch out before ourselves. We stretch into the distance. And I'll do one more to finish up. If everybody's still awake, are you? Yeah. This poem has to be retired soon, but I keep doing it. I keep thinking things will get better. I wrote a poem for the 1916 Rising, and I keep telling people when I'm at poetry readings that the worst poets in all of Ireland could get gigs for the 1916 Rising. There were gigs going left, right and centre, because of the poets' involvement in the Rising. And once I wrote this poem, it ensured that I got absolutely none of them. I never had a quieter year in my life. So this is my commemorative poem. It's called Cherishing for Beginners. And you'll know it's taken from the Cherish the Children of the Nation Equally from the Proclamation. If anyone's offended, a trigger warning for everything. Yeah. Cherish the meek, cherish the ranchers, cherish the guards, then cherish the bankers. Cherish the virgins, then ride them and cherish their sisters. Cherish tax exiles and entrepreneurs. Cherish the rewards of intergenerational privilege. Or if that's too hard for beginners, just cherish the Rose of Tralee for starters. Cherish the goal and the point and the foul. Cherish the priest's dirty sheets, but not the woman who washes them. Don't mention her or what she might need. Go on though and cherish the IFSC and its type of laundries. Those ones are grand. They're fine, sure. Cherish them. Cherish the men, because they couldn't help it if the women and girls went and fell pregnant. Cherish the fetus, the heartbeat, but not the person it's in. Then cherish the small graves in their undisclosed wastelands. Cherish the shovels and the boot soles that dug them. Let there be no doubt about it. Yes, we can. Cherish the children if they're from the right class and aren't travelling people or are not, God forbid, seeking asylum. Don't forget too that we must cherish the mute and cherish the sheepish, but hate those in need. Worship Father Peter McFerry himself. Go ahead and make him an icon, but don't listen to what he's saying about anything. Cherish the poor for how you can use them to frighten those who are just one rung above, and cherish the people who learned early and often what happens to those with big mouths. Cherish your local TDs and the crowd in Listowel who didn't care that he raped her. Sure, wasn't he one of their own? Yeah, cherish the rapist. Why don't you? Cherish the golf course and its sprinklers. Sure, Irish water will save us. Cherish piecework and internships and 0-hour contracts. Aren't you lucky you have a job at all? And do you not remember the coffin ships? Are you not grateful? Yet cherish your own exploitation. Cherish the school board for the lack of gay teachers, then cherish women's place in the home and cut their allowances. Joan Burton, sure they don't deserve them after having all of those children. Repeat after me. Cherish privatisation, and if you don't, then you better learn to cherish the knock on your door in the morning. Consider this a warning. Cherish Dev and Pierce and blood sacrifice. Don't mention Connolly, who said that until Ireland's women are free, nobody will be. But most of all, though, cherish outsourcing. And remember, your call is important. You too can be cherished equally if you can afford it as soon as an operator becomes available. But that may well take another 100 years. Thanks very much.
Much better. That's great. Oh, yeah. It's okay, I'm a professional. It's grand. I got this all sorted. As well as playing music around the place, I'm finishing a degree here at the minute. So it's probably, maybe it's not that unusual, because one of my fellow students was up a while ago, so probably like yourself, this song was actually written upstairs when I should have been doing something else instead. Haven't figured out what that something else is, but... and towards the end of last year, there was a sequence of events that occurred pretty much, well, they were one after the other. There was a sequence of them. That's right. I remember, that's right. And it was all within about 2 weeks. Leonard Cohen died, and then Donald Trump was elected, and then my father died. And taken together, I took it very personally, and I thought it was some kind of an assault on common decency. That's what I felt. But anyway, my father was a golf professional, and so this song is set on a golf course. And there's not many songs set on golf courses, but there may be a reason for that. So this is set on a golf course in Donegal. Grief comes like a downpour across the swilly, and for a moment he raises all things in its path. The very grass at my feet. That's good. Wish I could do that all the time. The very grass at my feet. Yeah, maybe it's not that good. I'm not sure. Seems to tremble as it approaches. I'm on the third tee. I take my stance and let it pass. As long as I live, there will be downpours. As long as I live, there will be downpours. Now the curious thing about these downpours is I can always see them coming. But once they're gone, I care not where do they go. They swallow me whole, but I can't say they are unwelcome. For they quicken me to life and to death, and they tell me things I did not know. As long as I live, there will be downpours. As long as I live, there will be downpours. Downpours. Of course. What they say when an older person passes, it's like burning down a library. No, sorry. Well, in your case, they may take out several newsagents as well. At Dream Space in a fine tea emporium, a fountain of goodness and those things that no tongue can tell. As long as I live, there will be downpours. As long as I live, there will be downpours. Grief comes, peace comes. Grief comes, peace comes. Thank you.